Well, good afternoon. I'm Bill Anderson. We are coming live from the Costa del Sol. It's a sunny day, but actually very windy today. I don't know whether it makes it a good day for kite surfing or a bad day for kite surfing, but they were predicting 3 to 4 meter high waves. Um, I, I want to welcome back Marcel Salazar. Marcel, welcome. How are you?
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me back again.
Yeah, well, you were actually due to come on at the last Friday of the month, but we had some little. I had to do some little changes around there because of scheduling. So I'm really grateful that
Okay,
you could come in today. So,
cool.
Marcel, are you well?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. Fortunately, staying healthy, staying active, actually being more active at the moment, and actually very relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. I'm feeling quite a lot of muscular soreness.
You are. Did you?
And I can explain why as
Did,
well, but
is
it relates very, very well to the topic of today's discussion.
right. I was just wondering if this is something that is fit to go out at 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. You know.
Yes, what I mean by what I've just said, perhaps
Go
I
on.
should clarify. Yes, you're absolutely right. I'm feeling muscular soreness, muscular stiffness because of physical exercise as opposed to anything else that you may be suggesting. Yes.
Right. Okay. Right. And so we're going to be talking about stretching today. Yeah.
Yes,
Let's
that's
see.
exactly right.
There have to be some puns in here. Let's see if we can stretch this out for an hour, Marcel.
Indeed. Let's see what we can come up with. Let's stretch this out for an hour. Very good. That's the beginning. Okay, good. Let's see what else we can come up with. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Where would you like to start with this one, Marcel?
Okay, so what I really would like to explain, first of all, I'm going to talk about the reasons why we'd want to start stretching, and why I recommend it to almost all of my clients, and then how to do it, different forms of stretching.
Right.
And then I'm going to explain a little bit about maybe why you wouldn't want to stretch, what the reasons would be for that. But this is
Okay.
going to apply for the majority of people as to why you would want to stretch.
Right.
And so maybe I'll start with the different forms of stretching.
Right.
So you have three fundamental ones. There are a few more than that, but I'll go into the three basic ones, which are static stretching, which is a
Okay.
stretch without movement, simple as that. Dynamic stretching, which is stretching with movement, simple
Okay.
as that. And then you have ballistic or PNF stretching as well,
That's it.
which is a more explosive, semi-high risk type of stretching that you would do as an athlete, or with a therapist, etc. So the first two you can absolutely do by yourself. The other
Right.
ones you'd probably do in a partnership.
Okay. Right. So let's start with that then, Marcel.
Okay.
I like the first one that you mentioned.
Yeah. The first one. The first one is probably the most common one. So let's start with static stretching. Okay. So
Right.
static stretching. Well, first of all, actually, let me explain why you want to stretch. What is a stretch, first
Okay.
of all? So a stretch is a preparation for your muscles and their connective tissues, so tendons,
Right.
to prepare for all-out exertion.
Okay.
So that could be anything from running for the bus to picking up a box to picking up a baby to carrying something to walking down the street. Just depends on your level of physical ability.
Right.
If you stretch regularly, it will make you more prepared for those types of activities.
Okay.
Now, the reasons we want to do that is because it protects the muscles, it increases your range of motion. It,
Hmm.
of course, therefore affects your flexibility, and everyone has heard about flexibility. And it helps to prevent injuries as well.
Okay.
So the more flexible you are, the less likely you are to injure yourself.
Right. So are we saying here, Marcel, then that stretching isn't just what joggers do before they head off for their run? That
Exactly.
this is something that really can apply to all of us to one extent or another in
Absolutely.
our day-to-day lives. Yeah.
It absolutely does. And I'm so pleased that you said this isn't just something that joggers do before they go, because there's two fundamental problems with that concept. And it's not to say that you're wrong, Bill. Don't worry about it. I'm not attacking you or anything.
No.
But it is currently exactly what people believe.
Sure.
In that it's something that you firstly is only applicable to joggers or runners, and that's not the case. It's actually applicable to every single person who has muscles, which is everybody, whether they're a lot or big or small. We've all got them. And then also when you'd want to do those exercises or those stretches. So in the example that you've just given, which is that of a runner, the type of stretching that they would actually want to do before they run is the dynamic one.
Right. Okay.
So we already distinguish between static and dynamic. They would want to do dynamic stretching. So shall I define what the dynamic stretching is?
Well, let's hold on to that bit, because we were talking about the one that I like, which is, what did you call it? Static.
Static.
Yeah. I can do static.
You can do static. Everyone can do static. Everyone can do static, and it's recommended. So that's very good. So static, as the word would assume, is standing still, or basically no movement. So you could be on the floor, you could be standing up, different places, but there's no movement in the stretch. But you're obviously attempting to feel a stretch. So if you're on live cam with me, I'm on Instagram live for myself. So I'm going to demonstrate what I'm talking about, and because you can see my torso. But if you imagine, as I verbalize this, you put your arm up above and your hand behind your head and down your back. If I then grab my elbow with my opposing arm and push my elbow backwards as if to run my hand down my upper back, I'm now stretching the muscle that runs down the back of my arm, which is called the tricep muscle.
Right.
This is a static stretch. There's no movement. I can just feel the pull running down behind my elbow all the way down towards my armpit.
Mm.
And that is a static stretch for the tricep muscle.
Okay.
So when would I want to do that? Well, I would ideally want to do that stretch when I've done some form of exercise for my triceps. So that could be anything like press-ups. It could be anything like chest press if you're in the gym. It could be any form of elbow or arm straightening activity. So anytime that I'm going from a bent arm position to a straight arm position, the muscles I'm using to do that are called the triceps. Right. And if I've done any form of exercise or activity that's done that a lot and I'm feeling tired back there, to stretch that muscle, all I would need to do is bring my arm behind my head and pull my elbow behind my head as much as possible. And if you're watching this live or on replay, you can obviously give this a go. Or if you're listening, give it a go and you'll feel a pull down the back of your arm there. And that will stretch that tricep muscle, but without a lot of movement. And therefore that is called a static stretch. And you would want to do that after you've done some form of exercise for that muscle. And crucially, you'd want to hold that stretch for more than 15 seconds.
Right. Okay.
So the 15-second hold is very, very important.
Yeah, I suppose I had this idea that the stretching was what you did before exercise, but what you're saying with the static stretches is this is after exercise.
Absolutely. That's right. That's absolutely right. And this is the fundamental problem, because in the old days, I'm talking 25 years ago and more, we were told to stretch before activity, and we were told that it needed to be the static stretch.
Right.
But actually what research has found is that actually that creates more problems than it solves, and it can result in injury. So the reality is you do that type of stretching only after physical activity.
Okay. Right.
That's very important. Very important.
So, I mean, you've described this static stretch for the triceps.
Yep.
What about the rest of the body?
Oh, okay. So let's talk about the fundamentals. So most people watching or listening to this will find that everything from the hip down actually are the most relevant ones. So anyone who walks, and that's obviously the majority of the people listening who are able-bodied to be able to walk on two legs, you would benefit from stretching your quadricep muscle. So the quadriceps are the muscles at the front of the thighs.
Right.
Again, if you're watching live or on video, I can stand up and show you. But what we're talking about here is to be in a standing position. Mm-hmm. What we can do is two options. If you have the physical capacity to stand up and to bring your heel to your bottom, and most importantly, bring your knee back and your pelvis forwards, that will result in a stretch right down the front of the thigh, just here. And that's quite extreme. I can really feel that because I've been working my legs recently, and that's quite uncomfortable for me, which is exactly how it should be, because I'm stretching those quadricep muscles. So again, to verbalize that, you stand on one leg, bring your heel to your bottom on the leg that you've lifted, squeeze your heel towards or as close to your bum as you can. Bring your knees so that they're level, because you will find that one knee will come forward, probably the bent one. And then as a finale, you push your hips forward. So if you're watching live or if you're doing this on replay, give it a go.
Right.
Make sure you've got good balance or lean against something and do that. And you should feel a very nice, fairly intense pull towards the front of your thigh in the quadricep muscle. And that exercise, that stretch, you can do every single day. And it's best done after some form of physical activity, even such as a walk by the beach, a walk down to the supermarket, a walk with the dog. When you get home from that walk, you would benefit massively from doing that stretch and holding it for at least 15 seconds.
Right.
Anything up to 30 seconds, and you can even do it twice if you want to.
And is this because, Marcel, that after doing some kind of activity, the muscles are warmed up, and doing these kind of stretches with your muscles warm is really what is advisable?
That's exactly right. So the reason why we would do the static stretch after exercise is because the whole point of that stretch is to create muscular relaxation. So you want the muscle to be then able to relax after activity, because of course, anytime you do any form of exercise or activity, the job of your muscles is to contract, and it's to contract and shorten.
Right.
So what we want is we want it to relax and lengthen as much as it possibly can. Now, what you've just said is absolutely relevant, in that if we are warm, the muscles respond very well to stretching.
Right.
And the type of stretching that we would do as a warm-up activity would be the dynamic stretching.
Okay.
So that we can come back into when we finish discussing, or when you're completely clear on the static stretch.
Yeah, no, I think that, for people who are perhaps not very active, they don't do sports. Yeah, they may do some walking and whatever, but they're not, they're not doing kind of cardio type exercises and things like that, or sports. I think it's quite important to say that there are still things that we can do to I don't know, keep everything in good condition.
Absolutely. And actually, it's interesting that you say that, because it actually becomes more relevant if you are less physically active.
Right. Yeah.
Because if you're more physically active, you're more likely to stretch.
Yes.
If you're less physically active, you're less likely to stretch.
Yeah.
So anytime you go for a walk is an opportunity for you to be able to stretch, because I'll tell you what I'm seeing a lot of at the moment, interestingly, and it's in men more than women, because men are usually tighter than women in their muscles, is extreme tightness in the muscles that actually eventually causes pain. And I had a patient who was a classic example of this about 2 weeks ago, who we did manage to sort out brilliantly. And actually, if you want to read his story, it's on my Google reviews. It's fantastic. Fantastic review, feedback as well. And then I have another gentleman who I'm seeing today, who has a very similar condition, whereby his muscles are so locked up, they are changing the way he walks, and it gives him constant pain. So now he can't get on the golf course. Anytime he walks for more than 15 minutes, he has to stop and sit down.
Right.
And and having investigated everything around it, there's no major injury, there's no trauma, there's no damage to his muscles. It comes down to the fact that his muscles have just got tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter until they haven't learned to relax properly. And this is what happens with age.
Yeah.
Your body's ability to recover, we've discussed this many a time, your body's ability to recover is impeded by age. But you can affect that very positively with regular stretching.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I did recognize that exercise that you were demonstrating there, because, I mean, it's exactly what I've been doing.
Good.
And yeah, it's interesting that, what you're saying, my problem was a pain in the knee. and
Yes,
you identified that the stretching that was needed was really this muscle on the front of the thigh,
the quad. Yeah,
and exactly that type of exercise. And I have to say that yeah, it didn't disappear instantly, but I don't even think about it now when I go out because
brilliant.
the pain has gone, and I have a sort of calendar that I'm married to. When she says, "Have you done this? Have you done that?" And are you still doing your exercises? Are you doing your
Very
stretching? And
good.
yeah,
Very
yeah.
good.
But
Very good.
I do hold on to a wall while I'm doing it just in case.
Exactly, but that's okay. That's really important because not everyone has the balance to do it on one leg. It doesn't even matter whether you've got the balance to do it on one leg because it's much more about the stretch than it is about your balance.
Yeah,
The more you do it, the more balance you'll get anyway, and the more you do it, the more comfortable it would have become. And you've absolutely hit the nail on the head in regarding to the pain didn't instantly go away. And the reason is because stretching, like strength training and like exercise, is something that has to be done consistently.
sure.
So the benefits are reaped after a period of time. It's
Hmm.
definitely not, sometimes it is really quick. When the body really wants it and the body recognizes it. Let's say if you've had a trained individual who then hasn't trained for many years, the body recognizes it through muscle memory. It recognizes stretching, it loves it, and it adapts very quickly. With everybody else, it could take months. It could take a couple of months of regular stretching, and suddenly the difference is profound. And as you say, the pain drops, the movement improves, flexibility is better.
Yeah,
More suppleness, more readiness to do activity, more better blood flow to the area. And that's another part of it, is blood flow through and to the area. What I find very often is, particularly with these clients that I was mentioning, their blood flow to the area is really limited.
right.
So as a result, there's no refreshing of the fluids inside. It's like drying out effectively.
Sure.
And again, this is what happens with age, but there's absolutely things that you can do to improve that.
Yeah.
So it's well worth doing. Even if you don't do a lot of exercise, it's well worth doing stretching and learning about it.
Yeah, because I didn't have anything serious, but I had this niggle for 2 or 3 weeks in my knee, and I was certainly very aware, Marcel, that first of all it was making me limp, and that's not comfortable when you're walking and you're limping all the time. And of course, that
That's right.
limp was actually causing problems or pain in my hip
There we
because
go.
everything was out of balance. And what
Yep.
I will say was the session that we had together and the exercises that you showed me to do afterwards. I mean, there was some instant relief, I have to say, but it took a couple of
Fantastic.
weeks to be able to say, "Yep, I'm not even thinking about it now. When I get up, I'm not thinking about the pain." But
Good.
and yeah, it was basically stretching.
Yeah. So imagine if you had ignored the pain or tried to fight through it and it had continued to get worse and worse and worse. You now don't have a problem necessarily just in your knee. You've now
Yeah.
got a secondary issue in your hip.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so now these things start to build up, and the solution is so simple, is so quick. It's something that can be done in 2 to 3 minutes every day.
Sure.
And that solves both problems, the hip and the knee,
Yes.
because the hip is only a problem because of the knee.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
But if you get rid of one, the other one goes away with it too. And that's why stretching can be really an absolutely fundamental methodology to help prevent, I mean, even to prevent the necessity or urgency to come and see somebody like myself.
Yeah.
As much as I obviously would love to encourage everybody to come and see a therapist because we can definitely help you,
Sure.
there are some things you can absolutely do by yourself. And my task is always to make people self-reliant,
Yeah.
and to give them the tools to be able to do it by themselves, as opposed to depending on a therapist and so on.
Yeah, and the thing in Spain is that, yeah, I mean, we actually have a very good health service here in Spain. I wouldn't
Yeah, it
want
is
to
pretty
take
good.
away from it, but for the kind of things that you're talking about, if you want to see a physio, for example, you might
Yeah.
need to wait 2, 3, 4 months or whatever, and
Yep.
you really want these things dealt with as soon as possible,
Yep.
don't you?
You do, and what I've heard from those individuals who have had to endure the local physiotherapy is that there are two fundamental problems. One, the wait time. Two, that the treatment periods are very brief. They're very,
Right.
very quick sessions, and as a result, what that indicates is that they're massively overworked, and it's in and out, get them in, get them out, get them in, get them out. So there's
Sure.
very little in the way of care. There isn't a lot of time to spend, even doing manual therapies if need be, which is very useful with tight muscles. Stretching is something that you would do in your own time, but when you come to somebody like me, I will accelerate that process of recovery because I'm able to manipulate the tissue to increase blood flow, to increase elasticity, to stimulate the muscles, to improve blood flow. As I think I said that. So, it's very, very useful.
Okay, Marcel, we're going to take a little break now. When we come back,
All
we'll look
right.
at the other bits, the dynamic and the other one sounded
Ballistic.
dangerous, ballistic. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
let's take a little break now. Welcome back. I'm Bill Anderson. We're coming live from the Costa del Sol, and my guest today, who's becoming quite well known, I think, on this show, Marcel Salazar. Welcome back, Marcel.
Thank you
And
very much.
we are talking about stretching. So we've been talking about the static stretching and
Yes.
why it's important. Um, Talk to us about the next bit, which is the dynamic
Dynamic stretching.
stretching.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the one that we would do prior to doing any exercise.
Okay.
So this is the one that the static stretch was the one we used to think we would do before exercise, but dynamic stretching is actually the one we really would want to do before we undertake any exercise. So
Okay.
to give a simple example, if we were to do a bench press, now hopefully all of our listeners know what a bench press is. That's when you lie on your back, you have a bar above your body, and you're pushing this bar above your chest, bending and straightening your arms. Simple as that, either
Okay.
with some weight or not. Now, if a person were about to warm up for that exercise, the best way to warm up for that exercise is to do that exercise.
All right. Okay.
So this may sound really logical or simple, but let's say for example, an individual who is a trained individual is going to do a bench press and they're going to apply 40 kilos, let's say, in total. The bar itself may weigh 20 kilos, which is literally half. And what they would do is 5 to 10 repetitions of that weight, the 20 kilos, just the bar by itself, in exactly the same way that they would aim to do it with the weight added on.
Right. Okay.
I'll give you another example that's a different world scenario,
Mhm.
but the way that person would warm up to prepare not just their muscles, but their nervous system as well for activity is to actually do the exercise that they're planning to do. But it's a stretch. It's not a muscular element. It's a stretch activation because we'd want to go through the full range of motion of exactly what you're going to do. In this case, a bench press. So if you're watching live in video, you can see that my arms are coming all the way back and then straightening all the way ahead.
Right.
Coming back and then going forward. And what's happening is I'm elongating the chest muscles, which is the muscle that I'm actually looking to use, as well as the muscles at the back of my arm in order to do this activity. And because I have a little bit of weight that I can manage, it's preparing me for when there's a lot more weight involved.
Right.
So that would be preparation and what's called a dynamic stretch or warm-up exercise.
So I suppose if you were, for example, going to be playing tennis, you would start off by knocking some balls back and forward
Exactly.
and
What you wouldn't want to do is you wouldn't want somebody to send a cross-court ball and sprint for it from the moment you get on the court.
right. Okay.
That's going straight into the exercise, and that's basically setting yourself up for an injury. What you would want is you might start on half the court, and then you just tap the ball, few back and forth, get the movement going, getting the racket to swing, moving the wrist, starting to move the arm. Then you take a step back and you continue to hit the ball with your partner, and then you take a step back. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, you're at the baseline, and then you're doing more wider strokes, still hitting it very lightly, still driving the ball over the net, but you're not powerhousing it in any way, and you're not exerting maximal effort through the stroke of the ball until after about 5 to 10 minutes, you've started to build up the power a little bit, maybe building in a bit of top spin and so on and so forth. And that would be a dynamic warm up with even a little bit of stretch, because all the movements could be exaggerated but slowed down, which puts a lot less stress into the muscle.
I suppose my way of looking at this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that by doing that, you're actually warming up the muscles that you're going to use for the sporting activity.
Correct. That's exactly right. So I'm going to demonstrate and talk through other exercises that would be perhaps more real world in everyday life. Let's say, for example, if we were going to go for a walk. If we were going to go for a walk, a great dynamic stretch / warm up is to stand up, reach your arms up above your head, and march in the spot. This is an exaggerated action in order to prepare your muscles in a controlled way. So I'm going to stand for a moment with those on live video. We stand up and we march on the spot, just like so. And what that's going to do is it's going to start to prepare the hips, it's going to start to prepare the calf muscles, it's going to start to prepare the quadricep muscles. Because you won't be walking like that. You won't be walking with your arms up and your knees going up above your chest, unless, of course, you want to. But you can warm up the muscles by just doing that at a very slow pace. You're not going anywhere. You're staying on the spot. But that is effectively opening out the chest, the abdominal muscles. It's affecting your posture. This is another element that stretching is absolutely fantastic for. Your posture is hugely affected by your flexibility, and regular stretching improves your general posture as well. So this is a dynamic exercise that you can do even if you're just going for a walk, because there's some form of movement that's quite gentle, but it's almost mimicking exactly what you're going to be doing anyway.
Yeah,
in that case, walking.
I have a story which is a friend of mine, and it's going to sound very funny, but it's really not very funny. He was having a barbecue with some friends. Nice warm day, and he decided, let's go for a swim. And he jumped out. He jumped out of his clothes, now standing butt naked. Decided he would make a quick run to the pool. And I think he only got 1 or 2 steps until, well, we found out later, he ruptured his Achilles tendon.
I know who you're talking about.
I know you know who we're talking about. So in an attempt to preserve his modesty by dashing to the pool,
we won't say names.
He ended up rolling about naked on the grass in agony.
Now, there you go. Absolute perfect example of, I mean, first of all, you've got to give him credit for getting completely naked, which I think is just an added, I think that's just an added bonus to the whole story. It's because what you want is to be rolling around in agony, hugging your knee to your chest, completely naked. That is obviously the way that you want the world to see you. But fundamentally, as you said, he wasn't prepared. His muscles, in this case, the connective tissues from his calf muscle down to his heel bone, wasn't ready to do what he wanted to do, which was a full-out sprint, an explosive movement towards the pool to avoid the stares of people in his birthday suit. And instead, unfortunately, because his tendons and muscles weren't ready, he actually ruptured that connective tissue, which is a huge problem, because obviously that's quite an extensive recovery period, possibly requiring surgery.
But he's had surgery.
You end up.
He's had the surgery on it.
He did have the surgery. I thought that was. I couldn't remember if he had to have surgery or not, but unsurprisingly, he did. So if you have a half or more tear of that tendon, you have to have surgery. And that's time consuming, and the recovery is long.
Well, he said to me, Marcel, I'll send you pictures, and I didn't know if it was pictures of him rolling about naked on the grass or pictures of the surgery, but thankfully it was a picture of the surgery.
I kind of feel like I might get some entertainment out of the first one you said, but anyway, that's fine.
But I mean, a very, I think, extremely painful injury to have, and as you say, a serious injury.
Absolutely. I mean, that injury, when you have that, the description of it, and if anyone listening, if you want to know what it feels like, it's like you've been shot in the back of the leg.
Right.
That's how people describe it. They feel like they've been hit with a bat or they've been shot in the back of the leg because the ligament just pops off.
Whoops, yeah.
And you drop to the floor. You know it's serious because you'll drop to the floor. You can't put any weight down on it. Your foot will probably be a bit floppy, and then it puffs up, and then
Right.
you got problems. So that would be obviously an emergency situation that you would want to obviously get somebody to hospital as soon as possible.
Yeah. So,
But that type of
what you're saying then is he really should have run around the garden a few times naked
correct.
before he made the dive for the pool.
Absolutely. If he had taken a gentle jog, completely starkers, just encompassing the whole barbecue scene,
Yes.
and then taken a jump in, not only would you have been entertained, potentially shocked,
Yeah.
traumatized, whatever, then he probably wouldn't have done it. He
Right.
probably wouldn't have done it. So yeah.
Okay.
So there's a lesson to be learned for sure.
Indeed,
For sure,
indeed.
definitely.
So we're talking. I'm really sorry, Jason, but I had to tell the story.
You said that, not me.
Indeed, indeed. So this is the dynamic stretching, which really is like mimicking the whatever the activity is that you're going to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. If I can demonstrate again, let's say I wanted to warm up my chest muscles, my pectoral muscles. Again, if you're on video, you can see this. I would just need to bring my arms up and I can move my arms back and forth.
Right.
And all I want to do is bring my elbows further behind me. And by doing that, I'm literally stretching the muscles of my chest.
Right.
So this would be classed as a dynamic stretch because I'm opening my arms as far apart as I can in an effort to increase and prepare the muscle for whatever activity that I'm going to do. I personally am feeling very sore because I've exercised the muscles of my chest recently. And when you don't stretch enough, you actually feel more sore. So if you go back to exercise, anyone that's done exercise will know what muscular soreness feels like.
Sure. Yeah.
If you work very, very hard, you're going to get muscular soreness. It's called DOMS, which is delayed onset of muscular stress or fatigue. You're going to get it, but you can reduce it and greatly affect it by stretching. It's a really, really good way to calm down very tight and sore muscles.
Right.
As we've already been saying about the tightness, but in relation to muscular soreness, to prevent muscular soreness, stretching is a fantastic way of reducing it. Doesn't always eliminate it, but it will reduce muscular soreness from exercise, particularly strength work,
Right.
which could be anything from a long walk to press-ups to sit-ups, etc.
Sure. So would I be right in saying then that if you're going to do whatever type of actual physical activity it is, whether it's going for a walk or whether it's playing a sport or in the gym or whatever, you would do the dynamic stretching before, which is going to mimic the activity, and then would
Yep.
you then in theory do the static stretching afterwards?
Yes. So this is very important for you to outline, and thank you for putting it that way. What I always try to encourage, I see quite a lot of golfers and tennis players.
Right.
Now, and paddle players as well. Golfers, it's a little bit more tricky because golf is a very much stop-start sport. You
Sure.
stop, you start. You walk, you stop. You talk, you hit, then you walk, then you stop, then you start. So there's no real excessive kind of physical exercise part. It might be walking from one hole to the next, is probably going to be the most physical part of it. But regardless of that, whether you've played golf, whether you've played tennis, paddle, there's going to be a period of activity, but it's when you get back to the bar. And this is the bit that I tell people. It's when you get back to the bar and you fancy that cold drink or a quick puff or whatever it is you're going to do, you need to ideally warm down in order to relax the muscles. And that's when you would do your static stretching, particularly of your lower legs, your quads, your hamstrings, your calf muscles. Those muscles will benefit hugely because the moment you go into a seated position, and this is another aspect that I wanted to talk about, which is predominantly people are in seated positions. So you are in a seated position, I'm in a seated position right now. Anyone listening to this live or on replay will probably be sitting. And what your seating position is in a position of what's called flexion. So you're flexed at the hips, you're flexed at the knee, and you're flexed in the ankles. The ankles is fairly standard, but the knees and hips will basically mean that the hamstring muscles, which are the muscles behind the leg, will be shorter, and the muscles above the thighs, which are called the hip flexors, will be shorter and therefore more prone to tightness.
Right.
So you'll know what this feels like, because when you stand up, let's say you've done any sort of sport, and then you sit down, you maybe have a beer, you have a drink, something to eat, and you haven't stretched. When you stand up, you probably feel a little tight. Your legs feel a bit sore, a bit tight. Obviously, they might feel tired, but they also might feel quite tight when standing up.
Right.
And that is because you haven't relaxed the muscles or stretched the muscles down after being physically active. So all that's happened is the muscle has stayed shorter because it contracts when it's active. It's stayed short, and it hasn't been allowed to relax fully. And that gets worse with age. Our muscles become less supple with age. But with regular stretching, you can recuperate that stretching. So after you've done any form of exercise, golf, tennis, paddle, the static stretch for more than 15 seconds is a very powerful way to speed up your recovery and to make you more comfortable for the next time you play.
Yeah. I know when I haven't been out for a while, but we used to do a lot of hill walking in the mountains around Mijas. And,
Yeah.
sometimes you've been out for 2, 3 hours, and then you reach a point and you think, oh, I'm going to have a sit down. So we sit down for 10 minutes, maybe to have a sandwich or to
Yep.
have some water or whatever. And then getting back up again is murder, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like you're made of wood or something.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's a prime example. That is exactly what happens. You've been physically active. Suddenly you go into this flex position and you stay there for a bit. And you're kind of thinking, well, when I stand up, I'm going to feel better, actually. When actually it's harder to stand up because everything's kind of seized up.
It's seized up, yeah.
And that is a big part of it. Whereas if you were to stretch for 2 or 3 minutes, no more than that, before you sandwich, then you sit down,
yeah,
you'll probably find that getting back up again would be much, much easier.
Okay. So
there is a mineral aspect that I would just throw into the mix here. It's very, very common, but the mineral that is incredibly powerful is magnesium.
Right.
So magnesium plays a nutritional part, and as you know, I always like to cover the bases nutritionally as well as physiologically. Magnesium plays a big part in muscle contraction and muscle relaxation. If you are deficient in magnesium, you will have very tight muscles. They won't be able to relax very, very efficiently. So supplementing magnesium is very useful, and I always and highly recommend Epsom salt baths. They are fantastic, and they really help sleep as well.
And that really it's a very old cure or whatever, isn't it? I mean, I remember when I was small, which wasn't yesterday. If I hurt my ankle or something like that, it would be a basin with Epsom salts in it and soak it.
I mean, the best advice I'd say for somebody who's done a long endurance activity, long walk, played a lot of sport, a marathon, those types of things, you will leak a lot of your magnesium through your sweat, a lot of minerals through your sweat.
Yeah.
So one of the best ways to recuperate and to minimize soreness is to have a magnesium bath. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's what they say is an old wives' tale or whatever, but it's not false in any way. There's science behind it. The magnesium is absorbed through your skin, and it goes directly into your circulatory system. So I would argue that doing it that way is slightly better than taking capsules.
Right.
Because it has to go through your digestive system if it goes via capsules, which can destroy a lot of it. So if you can have a bath before you go to sleep or after major activity, it's a fantastic way to help the muscles to relax, to process the waste products created by exercise, and to help you recover much faster. And it's magnesium, because Epsom salts effectively are magnesium salts. That's what they have.
Yeah. And actually, compared to a lot of supplements, they're dirt cheap, aren't they?
They are super cheap. I mean, I sell bags of it here in clinic. I sell bags of magnesium salt because it's cheap, it's easy, it's non-toxic, there are no side effects, and it helps. Yeah. So it's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's very interesting. If people, we live in the countryside, and we're going to be very careful with water. If we don't really have baths. We have quick showers
Right.
usually.
Yeah.
So, in that situation, would you recommend taking some kind of magnesium supplement?
Absolutely. You can totally take a magnesium supplement. The recommended dosage is around 1,000 milligrams,
Right.
which is quite a low dosage, actually. If you feel like you're deficient, you can take a little bit more than that. Obviously, follow any recommendations. Check with your doctor if you're unsure about
Mm.
any possible adverse reactions, which is extremely unlikely. But you can take a little bit more than that. But as a solution, if you wanted to get into your bloodstream, you can do a cheat, which is hot foot bath. Fill
Right.
the thing with magnesium salt and dip your feet in there, because it
Right.
will still go in through your skin and it'll get absorbed systemically anyway.
Okay, Marcel. Now we're getting on to onto the one. I should ask it if you kind of finished that part.
Yes,
And
yeah, I feel that. So the one thing I did want to say finally about the dynamic stretching is that the duration of the stretching, let's say if we're doing the arm movements, things like that, the duration doesn't need to be more than 10 seconds.
all right, okay,
So that's quite important, because the static hold, it can be about 10 to 15 seconds, but the static hold is 15 seconds or more, and that's very important. And the dynamic movements need to be about 10 to 15 seconds only.
okay,
There is something within the body called the stretch reflex, which is a topic I can get into as we move across into PNF and or ballistic stretching.
right, okay. Well, let's
Yeah.
let's go ballistic, shall we?
Let's go ballistic. Love it. Okay, fantastic. So ballistic and or PNF. I'm going to talk a little bit more about PNF, because that's a concept that I actually do in clinic, because it's a brilliant way of increasing flexibility very quickly.
Sure.
But it's a little bit more risky, which is why you want to do it in a couple or a partner, and you ideally want to do it with somebody who knows how to do it.
Right.
Whereas ballistic is a high risk activity with a quick return, but it's very rarely done by health professionals. I don't do it, but it's the final version of what I'm going to explain with PNF. So PNF is a fantastic abbreviation for a word called Proprioceptive Neuromuscular Facilitation.
Okay.
Now, Bill, feel free to repeat that after me.
Yes.
Sorry, caught you up. Proprioceptive Neuromuscular
Proprioceptive
Facilitation.
neuromuscular. What was the last bit? Facilitation.
Proprioceptive Neuromuscular Facilitation.
Yeah, yeah. It's easy for
Yeah,
you
that
to
one.
say.
Okay, PNF. Let's stick with PNF. All right, cool. So PNF is a concept of using the muscles against each other. Now, without getting too technical, muscles always work in pairs,
Right.
okay? And if we were to get a little technical, if you were interested, they are called an agonist and antagonist.
Yes.
So you've got a pair. So a good example of a pair is the quadricep muscle of the thigh, the one that causes extension at the knee, and the hamstring of the leg, which causes flexion at the knee. So that bends the knee. So the quad straightens the leg and the hamstring bends the leg. Okay. Now, one is an agonist, the other is an antagonist. So in this case, let's say the quadricep is the agonist and the hamstring is the antagonist. Okay. Now, what we can do with PNF stretching is we can effectively use, actually, before I say that, the muscles will only ever work in a singularity. They can't necessarily both be active at the same time.
Right.
Now, that's very, very useful, because we can use this concept in order, because of course they're both pulling against. One causes one action and the other one causes another action. So if they're both on, you have no movement.
Yes.
That's simple mechanics, right? If they're both on, there's no movement occurring. If one has to overpower the other in order to create movement. Now, with stretching, let's say we wanted to improve the hamstring muscle. There is a way that we can do that by activating the quadriceps. So if I have an individual on my couch, or we're out on an athletics field or track or whatever, I have that person lying on their back with one leg raised up on my shoulder. Now, what I can do is to dynamically warm up that muscle. I'll get the person to push their leg into my shoulder, which will activate the hamstring muscle, and we'll
Right.
just do a little bit of movement. Just a little bit of movement so that the knee is bending slightly back and forth, just to activate the hamstring muscle, which is the muscle at the back of the leg. Then, after a given period of time, maybe about 10 seconds, because again, it's a dynamic stretch, warm up, what I will then do is ask them to activate their quadricep muscle. And to activate, what that means is to literally straighten their leg as much as they can and lift it off my shoulder.
Right.
The moment they do that, they are activating the quadricep muscle, which is deactivating the hamstring muscle, allowing it to relax more effectively.
Okay.
And the word, there's actually a technical word for that, which again is one that I love. It's not quite as long as PNF, but it's called reciprocal inhibition.
Okay.
Okay. Reciprocal inhibition is a fantastic word, and it basically means that I'm activating one muscle with the aim of deactivating the other muscle.
Right.
But now, if we do that repeatedly, the hamstring muscle, the target muscle, will eventually relax and elongate.
Okay. So this is something, you know, this is the health warning bit, though, isn't it? That you're saying that this is the kind of exercise you really want to be doing with someone who knows what they're doing. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So this type of stretching is something that you would come to me for, or a trainer who's got specific skill sets in that sort of capacity. Yes, that because this one has a slightly higher risk. The other two are very low risk.
Right.
This one is slightly higher risk. Yeah.
Okay. So what kind of people?
So by doing that, it's very effective.
Yeah, what kind of people would come to you looking for this kind of stretching therapy?
Yeah. The people I tend to work with who do this are predominantly men and or any person who is quite physically active.
Right, okay.
So I see CrossFitters, rugby players, paddle tennis, golf. All of them are, golf less so perhaps because it's much less intense.
Right.
But the other sports, if they want to improve their flexibility, if they want to improve the movement around their hips or their knees, this type of treatment protocol, or wherever I'm training, it's not just the legs we can do this on. We can do this in the shoulders. We can do it in the biceps and the triceps, the chest, all sorts of different areas with the calf muscle as well. If the person wants to improve these parts, then that's something that I would work with them specifically. You don't have to be an athlete to do it.
Right.
You can absolutely be a relatively active person. The reason I wouldn't necessarily do it with somebody who was very sedentary is because the load that we're using, which is just their own muscles, really, might struggle with what we're doing and become very fatigued very quickly. Whereas somebody who's done some form of exercise would probably find it more than capable. And then their muscles would be prepared enough to manage the stress of the stretch that I would apply to the given area. And it's very, very quick and very, very rapid in terms of the change. I can have as much as 20 to 30 degrees increased range of motion just from one session of stretching on the hamstrings. It's fantastic.
Yeah, but as you say, if a person doesn't have a certain level of fitness, they're not going to be able to do this very easily anyway, are they?
No, they're going to struggle with it, and it would be done at a very low level. And I would always try to prepare the person by teaching them about how to recognize a stretch first. Right. So the dynamic or the static stretches first. Yeah.
And that was like when I went for my medical for renewing my driving license, and the doctor said, "Touch your toes," and I said, bending my knees or without bending my knees?
Valid question. Very valid.
Yeah, and she meant without bending my knees. I could feel it in the hamstrings, I have to say.
I bet you could.
Yeah.
I guess the reason that they're testing that is to see whether you physically can without either falling over or not. I mean, I'm not quite sure exactly what that's measuring.
Yeah, they do a few things in these medicals. I'm not quite sure what the principle is behind it, Marcel. Marcel,
we're talking old school there.
We are. Listen, we did stretch it out for an hour. Our time has gone,
We
Mr.
did stretch
Salazar.
Out. Very good for a whole hour. Amazing.
So thank you very much once again for joining us, and
You're so welcome.
it's I think given us a lot to think about, and something I think for everyone here. You know, whether you are, you know, going for the Ironman or whether you're going for a walk down the street to do your shopping.
Yeah.
Marcel,
Yeah.
thank you so much. May I wish you and your lovely family a great weekend.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to everyone who's been listening in. And we're going to go out with something from Queen. Thank you, Marcel. Have a great
Yeah,
weekend,
lovely.
everyone.
Thank you.
Gonna have myself